The aim of this lesson is to start to apply shading to your time composition. So firstly, you need to gather some essential equipment. So obviously we're going to do a pencil drawing, so you're going to need pencils. Now you might not have shading pencils. If you have got a choice of pencil, try to pick one that is a high B number, because it's going to make it easier for you to create those darker tones. I've also here got a H. You could use a HB or an ordinary pencil for the lighter tones. Okay, now with my rubber, it was quite rounded on the end, so I took some scissors to it and just cut off a small section. Now I can use this small section to create little rubber back highlights, or you could cut an old rubber down a little bit more to create a really nice point. Okay, so that's also essential. Sharpener to keep a sharp pencil. Now we need to make a couple of viewfinders. So a scrap piece of white paper. This is roughly, I'd say 6 centimetres by 5 centimetres. Fold it in half, and we're aiming to cut about 1 inch square out of the centre. Okay, so we've got something like this. Now it's quite useful to actually have two. So if you wanted to bend that one back inside, we can probably have two that are roughly the same. Okay, so like that. Okay, now hopefully you've still got your watch. Okay, you're definitely going to need that today. And you should also have your photograph if you can print one out. If not, you can look at it on the screen or on your phone. Okay, now one other thing that you might find quite useful is a cotton bud. Okay, we're going to be doing some quite detailed work, and this will just help you to blend in a little bit more of a controlled way. I wouldn't recommend blending your whole drawing because it can look quite flat, but little parts would help to give it a little bit more shine. Okay, so just going back to my 6B pencil, I've obviously sharpened it quite a lot, so I've got a really nice point. Now what I'm going to be focusing on today is this chain section that I've already started. Now looking at this, it's got, I think it's going to be this way up. Okay, now it's got vertical, okay, and horizontal sections, so we're going to need to apply what we call contour shading to emphasize that 3D effect. So just looking at this section here on my photograph, okay, these are the horizontals and these are the verticals, so I would need to almost create that box effect to emphasize that structure. So looking at this one, the contours will be coming in this direction. Okay, and then the verticals would emphasize the fact that that's standing up. Okay, now that would be, if you just left it like that, probably grade 4, grade 5 shading. Okay, it's not very specific, and I know you can do better. So taking your viewfinder, you're going to section off part of your drawing. So try and section off a whole chunk. So I've got one link of the chain so that it kind of makes sense, and then you can section off your drawing as well so that you're not overwhelmed by such a large picture that you're going to draw. Now just by putting this white piece of paper here, I can see that top section is very, very light, so I need to use my cotton stick, okay, blend a little bit of shading that I've put on there. Okay, and I can see already I'm going to need to use one of my pointy rubbers just to rub back a little bit of that tone, and then put the lines back in that I can see. Okay, now just looking at this small section, I think the darkest part would be this line just underneath, and perhaps this bit here. So it is helpful to put in those really dark areas, which instantly gives your work a little bit more contrast from quite an early stage. Okay, and I'm trying to keep my contour hatching going in the right directions. Now, very little of that is actually white. Okay, so most of this you are going to have to build up the tone. Okay, and then rub back those highlights. I'm just going to move that out of the way a second, just so we can see the whole form. And I'm going to add on some little linear bits. And again, that's a diagonal that's going away from me, so I need to just put those contours on at a slight angle. Okay, now if I wanted to get quite a soft tone, I could put my pencil on the side. Okay, so I'm holding it above, okay, with my finger pushing down, just to get a soft tone. Little bit of blending. Now you can see every time I blend, I then put more pencil on top that I don't blend. Now the idea with the blending, it's going to get rid of the tooth of the paper. So the tooth of the paper is the texture that the paper has, and when you put shading on it, it does emphasise that, and it looks like little white specks. But the more blending you do from light to dark, and the more layers, the less of that you will have to deal with. Okay, now another thing we need to take notice of is the light source. Now I've got my lamp, okay, on the right hand side, so when I took my photograph, the light was on the right hand side of the clock. So that means, okay, that the highlights are kind of picking up on this side, and then the shadows are on the opposite side. Now to get a really 3D drawing, you really need to take note of where those shadows are. So looking underneath here, they're almost coming down, okay, and again pencil on the side, nice soft bit of shading. And that's going to emphasise any shadows in the background. Okay, now this is obviously going to take, you know, several hours to complete. So what I want you to do in this lesson is focus on one small section so that you can see it coming together and starting to really create that 3D effect. Okay, now most of your watches are going to have a smooth texture, so you are going to need to do the smooth shading from light to dark as well as possible.